Okay, and welcome back. And we are exactly where we left off then, in early July 1852, and have had a bit of time to sort of digest and sort of drill into the detail then of a string of magnificent victories that we enjoyed over the Russians over the last 2 weeks. Just kind of recap then, we kind of broke our forces into separate corps commands because we just couldn't get Rita Pasha to basically bring his army to bear. So we used the independent kind of corps, we moved them north, and Omar Pasha in particular scored successive victories over a number of Russian forces, taking a lot of prisoners, inflicting heavy casualties, and destroying entire regiments in pretty significant number. And we received a pretty significant national morale boost as a result of this. So this was publicly recognized as a very significant victory. Now, looking into the detail of the number of prisoners he took and the number of casualties inflicted, it's pretty substantial. It's the most significant victory by far that we've enjoyed over the Russians. In total, his army corps, which is comprised of about, it's slightly reduced now, it's 21,000, it's about 25,000 men, took 24,760 prisoners in his campaign ranging from Adrianople through Romania up to Varna. In addition to just short of 25,000 prisoners, he inflicted a further 25,000 casualties and destroyed 23 entire regiments, many of which would have been under strength, of course. And one of those regiments was a Corps HQ service asset unit, which is essentially the command staff of an entire army corps. Now, in an army corps, there are about 13 elements, which is to say 13 regiments. So that's nearly 2 entire army corps worth of regiments were folded up. Russian casualties, if you include prisoners, mounting to about 50,000. And he sustained, by the looks of it, about 3,000 or 4,000 casualties. So it's an astonishing victory. Further to that, based on our intelligence of Russian armies, I will address the kind of elephant in the room, which is the force sitting over Constantinople. This is a very small force, there's nothing to worry about. We can't actually see any remnants of his command. This force is comprised entirely of divisions, ad hoc formations. It's quite a substantial force. It receives a hefty command penalty, but this could be a force of something like 150,000 men, but it's broken into sort of divisions and brigades and this kind of thing. It's a very ad hoc force, really. And to the north we have one cavalry division, and then we have one cavalry brigade, which has moved into sort of just north of Sofia. Also, if I look at the commanders, we can't actually see the officer that was in command. Is it Paskovich? I think his name was Prince Paskovich. We can't actually see him. He's nowhere to be seen, which means that he may have been killed or wounded in that battle. If he was wounded and carried from the field, he will be in Odessa and will be locked there for some time whilst he receives treatment. If not, he may have died. So a really, really significant victory, I think. And the first unit, of course, that moved in was Abdul Karim Nadir's force. And he was defeated. He was defeated pretty wholesale. In the initial contact, he took 15,000 casualties. No regiments were destroyed or anything, but it looks like in breaking contact, of course, I deposited his corps in Adrianople. He took further casualties, probably another 5,000 casualties or so. His regiments look almost entirely depleted of forces, but they weren't actually destroyed. Every single regiment still has a number of officers and administrative staff, which means that they can simply just receive replacements. A kind of core exists, a cadre exists around which we can kind of flesh out those regiments by simply sending in replacements of officers. And in fact, it comes from our replacements pool. We can send replacements of officers and replacement conscripts. The difference between sustaining heavy casualties in a regiment, which is one of these elements here, and having a regiment destroyed entire, is that if a regiment is destroyed entire, as we experienced early on, I think in the first Adrianople, one of our cavalry divisions, I think, was largely destroyed, is that in order to reconstitute a regiment, your force has to do what we've done anyway, actually. It has to be deposited inside inside a depot, essentially, a town or a city with a depot, and it requires more time to reconstitute a regiment from scratch because you need to form the administrative staff, the officer corps, and so on. And that's a bit more of an elaborate process. If a regiment is destroyed entirely, of course it means that every single member of that regiment, the administrative staff, the officers, and all of the men are either killed or captured, to the point, and the colours are taken, so the regiment just doesn't exist anymore. It exists only on paper, and it has to be reformed from scratch. So the Russians, if any of those forces survived and managed to reach north into Bessarabia, they would be looking at a fairly long stay in Odessa to reconstitute a lot of these forces. I suspect that we may have actually destroyed 2 army corps entirely, possibly. Yeah, it's a pretty staggering victory, and yeah, Omar Pasha is now promotable. He'll be replacing Rita Pasha in command of our field army in Europe, in the Balkan Peninsula. That will change things significantly. He's a much more serious professional officer. Rita Pasha, we're not going to get rid of him. I mean, he's still a 3-star general, and we do still require his services. He will be sent to the east, because in the east we only have lieutenant generals, and we do require the command points. We will be building very soon an additional army corps, probably in Sinop, and with Rita Pasha in place, that means we'll have a much more substantial force in the east, that we'll actually be able to make a more serious stand against Vorontsov's Prince Vorontsov's force here, which is kind of was periodically besieging Kars, but it's kind of thankfully fallen back. I don't know what happened there. The elephant in the room then. So I kind of neglected to mention, it was only instantly after I stopped recording, that I thought, oh, why didn't I mention the force? So yeah, in the midst of kind of Omar Pasha's kind of staggering sort of sortie to the north, it looks like a Russian division has appeared, a very small Russian force appeared outside Constantinople. This is nothing to worry about. This has absolutely no chance of taking Constantinople whatsoever. The garrison in Constantinople will be many times larger than this force. It will have to be dealt with very quickly. It's a raiding force, a kind of spoiling raid. It's designed to really distract, for us to pull forces back. And we're going to do exactly that. I mean, Abdul Karim has now got the reserve army corps attached to his command. We're going to send him into Constantinople. It's going to take him 3 days. And then after that, we'll pursue the force, if it's not completely destroyed in Constantinople, into Adrianople. And then we're going to move north into Rumelia and link up with what is still technically Rita Pasha's command. And I'm quite sure that would be sufficient. That's an entire army corps. He's a fast-moving officer. He's a pretty capable officer, is Abdul Karim. So that'll be dealt with quite quickly. If it doesn't simply re-embark and leave, it may be the case that it's completely pointless. It just adds a bit of time to Abdul Karim's sort of deployment. But in any case, it has to be done. It's a measure that has to be sort of undertaken. We've now got sort of 2 supply wagon assets moving into place to hook up with Rita Pasha's army, the European Field Command, soon, of course, to be Omar Pasha's command, and that's going to provide us with a bit more flexibility in terms of what we do with it. At the moment, of course, we're drawing supplies directly from Adrianople, and our next play is going to be looking to kind of sortie north, lifting the siege at Plevna. It's a little bit of a tricky, dangerous situation here. The commander that is here is Prince Alexander Baryatinsky. He's not a bad commander at all. He's much more balanced by the looks of it. He's got similar kind of stats to Omar Pasha, actually. So he's no dunce, but he has a very kind of a very ad hoc force. Really, he doesn't have kind of army corps, so his forces don't have integrated command HQ assets. And it's a very large force. It's a very large, unwieldy force that he has. So we're going to try and use that to our advantage. We will have much greater force concentration. And when our forces do collide with his, our intention is to get these guys back south and join up with the main army again. The idea is we're going to be punching with a much tighter fist, if you like, than he's going to have. His force is a little bit clumsy. That may change, of course. He may kind of change his deployment. We don't know what his intentions are. What we are going to do is to try and ensure this force, having been very successful, it's slightly vulnerable in Varna now. Our force is split. We're going to set it to sort of retreat if engaged. And we're going to move Zarif Mustafa Pasha down. We're going to connect that his force up. It's going to take him 1 second. It's going to take him 7 days then, and we'll also do exactly the same with Omar Pasha. By the time he joins this force, he'll be it's going to take him 6 days. He will be hopefully promoted and be in a position to take over command. When he's promoted, it's often the case that because you have a vacancy for a lieutenant general will be created in Constantinople. So it doesn't always happen. There's a limited inventory of how many officers you can have, of course, and that varies from faction to faction. But at this early stage, his promotion will allow us to sort of spontaneously create a new lieutenant general, which will be able to take over the Imperial Guard or some other army corps, which Omar Pasha will be vacating. That's our planned deployments then, really. On the Western Front, we have noticed that a very small Russian force, a cavalry brigade, is kind of doing exactly the sort of thing that these small formations are really adept at. Moved into Augusta, northern Bulgaria. Of course, has briefly taken over our cereal farm operation there. We're moving forces into place to fairly quickly deal with that. We might have to expect further forces, however. Baryatinsky does have a very large force in Plevna. The structure is intact in Plevna. This force is large enough that they might try and make a real push. They might try and storm that fortress. If they do, that could be a real mistake, because he will sustain losses. He would experience disorganization. And of course, in late July, we're going to have achieved force concentration again in Rumelia. Hopefully, Omar Pasha will be activated at that time, and hopefully we'll be in a position to move north and exploit that if that happens. In the east, then, I should say very quickly as well, actually, I have sorted the Ottoman Navy. I've set it to sort of shore bombardment, because we want to kind of shell these small forces. We want to try and stop them from kind of escaping by sea. We also want to ensure that they're not reinforced with anything more substantial. So we're sorting the Ottoman Navy. We're going to put out, sort of bring our guns to bear on this small force that is sitting outside Constantinople. And we're going to move north and block any kind of access that the Russians may have. We want to stop them either evacuating that force or reinforcing it. And the Ottoman Navy, it still hasn't had its supplies completely replenished. It has achieved significantly greater sort of degree of organization and cohesion, but it's quite a large force. It would take quite a bit of time for supplies to be kind of organized for a force of such a size, and supplies haven't been brought on board those ships just yet, not all of them anyway, but there's sufficient supplies for them to sortie, to engage in a relatively limited sortie. Now Hussein Avni in Erzurum, he's activated. We're going to set him to a defensive posture. We're going to press for an all-out attack, and we're going to move to Trebizond, where there is a bit of rain in Trebizond that's going to slow things a little bit. It's going to take him 13 days, and we're going to be engaging a guard corps, a Russian guard corps, but it's a guard corps that isn't commanded by any kind of officers or anything. This should give Hussein Avni hopefully a bit of an advantage. I might actually set him to a sustained attack, see what happens, because I don't want to sort of suffer any kind of devastating losses there. Avni Pasha we're going to set to defend and retreat, so if Vorontsov's force does move into Kars, we can see also the appearance of a cavalry division, so that's going to be about 5,000 men. Good chance that's going to make a play for Batumi to try and open up contiguous territory to Trebizond. We've set the Bashi bazooks there to simply kind of retreat if engaged. They're really there just to kind of get a bit of military control over the region and just function as a bit of a deterrent, especially for small brigade-sized forces. And our eastern flank then is kind of still awaiting. It's going to be 33 days. We'll go for a forced march, I think. Try and speed that up a little bit. That could be pushed up to then 26 days if the speed march comes off. About 20% chance that each turn will kind of increase the speed of it. It will suffer significant organizational loss, but that doesn't really matter. It's a supply detachment in the last analysis. Not much else to report, I don't think. No reports of any rebellions or anything like that to speak of. The Constantinople garrison has obviously been mustered. To be expected, a force has made an appearance there. And yeah, nothing else to report. I have quickly kind of engaged in a bit of economic administration. We are sort of keeping a careful eye on manufactured goods. We don't want to spend too much in the way of manufactured goods. So to that end, we had a bit of capital accumulated, decided to kind of invest that in another fisherman's port in Sinop. It's a pretty cost-effective form of economic expansion at this stage. We have engaged a number of large, heavy industrial enterprises in Constantinople. And they're going to take a bit of time to build. I think in the meantime, we can just kind of like just continue to gradually develop our economic base, broaden it when opportunities present themselves, sort of thing. So nothing else to worry about too much. Going to really quickly check our sort of assets balance then, and let's have a look at where we're importing from manufactured goods. Okay, let's have a look. Let's hover over North Germany. We've got access to North Germany's kind of markets now with our expanded merchant fleet, and I'm going to press for a premium on manufactured goods here. I think we'll go for Rule 10 and we'll press for a premium there. There we go. Let's also have a quick look at Scandinavia. We've got a little bit of private capital. We've got plenty of private capital to kind of for our operational costs. There's 8 there as well. We'll press for those and we'll pay a premium. We're absolutely fine with that. Manufactured goods is a bit more of a priority at the moment than kind of capital accumulation. That's it. Let's pass turn, see what happens. Now, Omar Pasha is very much a creature of the new Ottoman army. He's not Turkish. He was Serbian born, or ethnically Serbian, although kind of born in Croatia, what's modern-day Croatia, the kind of frontier territories to the north. And he was born in the Austrian Empire. He wasn't even born in the Ottoman Empire. And his father was a relatively senior Austrian commander. And I'm trying to think of his real name. I think it was Mikhail Latas, I think was his real name, and his first name, his Christian name anyway. And he joined the Austrian army and served under his father as a junior officer in his staff command, I think, as a kind of in a clerical capacity. But he was involved in an embezzlement scandal in the Austrian army, and he fled the Austrian Empire. He fled to Our Eliat in Bosnia and spent a few years there in sort of poverty and sort of anonymity. Now, in the aftermath of the auspicious incident, the dissolution of the Janissaries in the 1820s, and then in the immediate aftermath of that, of course, the war with Russia, when that war finished, the efforts really begun to kind of reconstruct a new modern Ottoman army, which is the army that we have now, the Nazi Military did. And some Ottoman commanders became aware of Mikhail Latas. He was someone that had served in the Austrian army. He had familiarity with kind of Western arms and practices, and on that basis he was recruited into the Ottoman army, where he really found himself. And he was someone, even though he was a fairly junior officer in the Austrian army, it's quite clear, historians seem to think that he was someone that was, took a keen interest in military matters. He wasn't just kind of an amateur officer or anything like that. He was very much died in the war kind of staff officer, And he joined the Ottoman army, I think in 1828 or something like that. I kind of briefly looked at the Wikipedia page, and someone told me this actually. Someone informed me of this in an earlier game when I was playing the Ottomans, and I I shared this character, and the person actually said, "Oh, that guy is actually a Serb in real life." And he became a lecturer in the Ottoman kind of army college, the sort of staff officer college, for a period of time in the Ottoman army, and then he became an aide de camp to one of the senior officers of the period that was involved in constructing. He doesn't feature in this game because he's either passed away by now, he's sort of either dead or just retired. He was actually a Polish general in the Ottoman army, but he was one of the senior figures in developing the new model army in the late 20s, early 30s sort of thing. And Omar Pasha, his new adopted name, he had to adopt Islam also. He yeah, he was an aide-de-camp to this officer, and we're pretty lucky to have him. I mean, he's someone that's a pretty serious kind of military officer. He's someone that's devoted his life, really, to the armed forces. And by this period, he would have already spent, nearly 2 decades in the Ottoman army in a pretty senior role, teaching in the officer college and then serving as an aide-de-camp to significant and influential officers that were constructing the new army. So he's a creature of the new model army. He's aggressive. He's a tactician of inland, so he has really, really good advantages when attacking. He's particularly good at assembling forces to achieve force concentration at the point of attack. He's a disciplinarian. He understands the importance of discipline, and he's also diplomatic. So one of the features that he will have is quite similar to the corrupt Rita Pasha. When he's in command, he's still quite a schmoozer. He's kind of good at getting junior officers to acquiesce, which means that he has a fairly generous command point allotment, so he can command large armies, not quite as large as Rita Pasha, but he can command large forces, and those forces will pack a much more significant punch. He also has just generally very good stats. He's a very, very balanced commander, and bear in mind that at this time, I think he's only in his 40s. He's in his 40s, late 40s, early 50s. He was in the Ottoman army to the 1870s, or at least he died in the 1870s, but the hope is we're going to have him as a fairly senior officer for the next decade, or possibly next 2 decades, which would be really good if it is the case. In real life, he served in the Crimea, and he was a sort of, fairly capable Ottoman officer in the real Crimean War. But our hope here is that he's going to develop into much more, and his statistics are subject to change and will change on the basis of his promotion and on the basis of the experience that he acquires from his command. So even though he starts off as a fairly capable commander, the hope here is he's going to become even more capable. He's going to quickly develop his tradecraft, and that's the hope. The other officer we're kind of keeping an eye on is Hussein Avni to the east. He's still a lieutenant general. He hasn't really experienced much combat. In fact, he's the guy that's going to be moving into Trabzon to kind of deal with that guard corps. He's also a really good prospect for promotion. Having him and Omar Pasha as 3-star generals, would be something would be really desirable for us. Okay, so it looks like the Russians have decided to try and storm Plevna, and my God, they have suffered some pretty significant casualties in doing so. It is considered a defeat, but I would say that was balanced positive, actually. The combat lasted for 5 rounds, so it's a 5-hour combat. We suffered 13,000 casualties out of a force of 37,000, and they have suffered 25,000 casualties, 10,000 horse, nearly 150 cannons. So in a pretty foolhardy move, they have decided to try and storm an intact fortress, and with 90, so we can see the size of their force. Obviously that's somewhat reduced now. Good God, there's a lot of cavalry there. 50,000 cavalry, 630 guns. Ivan Paskovich, okay, he was there. I thought he was either dead or wounded, but no, he's there, and he's doing his thing, being too aggressive. This was exactly the kind of mistake that we hoped for, and they haven't just suffered casualties. Same thing, entire regiments just decimated. I know the Russians have manpower to spare, but this is a profligacy in life that is hard to comprehend. But yeah, another 25,000 casualties plus 10,000 cavalry in the bag to 30,000. And bear in mind, these are 30,000 garrison troops. These troops are sort of automatically spawned. They're kind of they're not, like the garrison that's rallied on the basis of a siege will automatically, in fact, they'll all just be automatically replaced. These are very cheap. These are category B soldiers. These are soldiers that are not fit for frontline service. These are kind of middle-aged men with big bellies. In a fortified position, wiping out entire regiments of the Russian army. Yeah, excellent. Thanks for coming. It's considered a defeat. I wonder why. So we'll have a look after, actually. I wonder if the remainder of the garrison surrendered. Even if they did, that's still balanced positive. We'll be in a position to take that back very quickly. That's good. That's a victory then. That's the small cavalry force that we've engaged. They'll fall back. We'll take that farm back. That's in... Okay, excellent. Not completely wiped out. A bit frustrating. Number of prisoners. So this is the force in Constantinople, the kind of division, would get a clearer picture of what it was. That's interesting. They had supply trains there, so they if we could take those, that'd be really handy actually. Yeah, I mean most of their force destroyed, perhaps all of it actually with the prisoners. We'll see. I thought they would try and embark and leave, but I guess not. Well, a really promising opening turn then, as we head into late July. A really promising. I mean, colossal casualties inflicted on the Russians in the north. The small kind of spoiling raid, a little bit larger than I thought. There's about 7,000 men, largely destroyed. That's the barrage. We can see that our ships are barraging Constanta, just because they're set to kind of shore barrage. By the looks of it, we'll flick back there. We could see some Russian Marines being landed just near Odessa as well. It may be that they're probably panicking a little bit. We'll have to see. Another really excellent turn though, and yeah, I'd say that fortunes are starting to turn. Fortunes are starting to turn in our favour. We're kind of starting to get the initiative. We're starting to kind of dictate the tempo of action, which is exactly what we need to be doing, ready to turn the tables. Day 15, that's finished processing, so I don't think there's any more prospect for any more battles. You'll notice the map flicks around. This is kind of about as good as you get. I mean, where it flicks to is fleshed out with your intelligence reports anyway, which are worth reading, but these serve as just kind of visual cues for things that are happening around the world. So occasionally you'll kind of, you get wind of a large engagement happening somewhere and this sort of thing, and information is a bit sparse at this time. So that's all this sort of reflects, really. It's why we often end up in China, because China's in the midst of a kind of civil war. So towards the end of the turn process, obviously a few events are kind of triggering. Okay. Let's flick back and have a look what's happened. First British force landed. West India Regiment, 1 Royal African Corps, Artillery Indian Service Corps. It's a pretty decent sized force by the looks of it. Okay, Ahmed Pasha, we have a new Lieutenant General. Obviously he's going to be filling the boots. He's corrupt, bit of a shame. Good subordinates, tactician of a lamb. Mixed bag, not bad at all. Okay, let's have a look then at the character of our forces. Oh, okay, so once he's promoted, obviously his seniority declines somewhat to 14 because he's kind of attained a new rank. That's fine. Let's begin to compile our force then and try and get a bit of a clearer picture of what's happening. So we're going to detach Rita Pasha from that force. Instantly you see the combat value increases because we've got a more capable officer in charge. And that's good. We've still got the command points is fine. The command points, it's 39 and 50. So we'll probably have to detach one of these artillery regiments in order to fit another entire army corps. Aha, supply wagons. Russian supply wagons. We've captured some supply wagons in Constantinople. That's good. I think we'll leave them in there for the time being. Let's move Ahmed Pasha then. To join up with the main field army. He's our new Lieutenant General. And let's get Abdul Karim also to move up. I thought he would kind of complete. I thought once engaging in Constantinople, he would then move to sort of Adrianople, move through and join, but he didn't. That's fine. That's no real sort of problem. Even with this force, we might actually be in a position to move. I mean, Omar Pasha is activated. It's tempting. Okay, so we can see that it appears as though Paskovich is back in command, Prince Ivan Paskovich. So he survived. He's not a very good defensive commander, though, is he? We know that. And we can see, actually, the remnants of some army corps then. So we can see now some of the forces that we thought were destroyed have, in fact, kind of appeared there. So they were perhaps kind of concealed for a period of time. They may have been set to sort of not engage and sort of basically evade combat, which means that they would utilize terrain to conceal themselves, probably because they were kind of quite badly mauled. Question is, excuse me, do I await? Do I await the army corps from Constantinople? Or do I push north with what I have in play in Rumelia? It's risky. I'll think on it. I won't decide just now. Okay, we can see then that Hussein Avni, for whatever reason, failed to engage and is set to passive posture. Why is that? Let's have a look. No clear information on that. I think we'll have to drill into the reports a little bit more to find out what happened there. It may be that the force just reached a certain level of kind of exhaustion that it wasn't able to press into Trabzon. But in any case, okay, this force appears though it's in Erzurum. It's actually not. It's up here. We'll set him to a kind of defensive posture then, and we'll hold him in place for the time being. He is activated. It will only take him 7 days, but yeah, it's not entirely clear what happened there. For some reason, his force was not able to move into Trabzon and was set to a passive posture. I suspect that his force just reached a sufficient level of disorganization that it wasn't able to complete its action. Okay, what I'll do then, I think I'll leave we'll leave this video here for the time being, and I'll drill a little bit into some of the reports to provide a bit of an appraisal of kind of what's happened for next turn. We'll do the same sort of thing. We'll start next turn in late July, kind of where we left off, so that we can kind of run through the turn together and see what happens. But we now have a very capable commander in charge of our main field army in the European theatre. He is 1 army corps short of his full force. That's fine. I'm happy with that. We're going to drop out an artillery regiment and give that to Riza Pasha. Riza Pasha, of course, is now going to be redeployed to the east because we don't have a 3-star general there. So we'll get him on a kind of slow journey heading east he'll bring with him an artillery regiment, I think, as well. Raiding force completely destroyed by the looks of it in Constantinople, and we'll bring our forces north now into Rumelia to begin to get some force concentration together and consider whether or not it's worth the risk of Omar Pasha. Risks have paid off so far, but whether it's worth the risk of Omar Pasha moving into Plevna. The structure is now partially breached, and this force has sustained losses, fairly significant losses. There's a pretty good chance that next turn that fortress will fall, but it might not. We might just inflict another 20,000 casualties of the Russian force, which is rather tempting. So I'll leave it there, and we'll give it a bit of thought, and I'll see you in the next one.